בשם השם נעשה ונצליח, שיעור תורה, ברוכים הבאים, שבוע טוב, שבוע מבורך. We're starting another week with our series of Jewish HaShkafa, the Jewish ideology. Tonight's shiur was sponsored by and also for the miraculous refuah shlema of Tinok ben Rivka, also for refuah shlema for Rivka bat Sarah, for Shira Dvora bat Dikla, also for refuah shlema for Chanoch ben Sarah, Rabbanit Levana bat Sarah, Rav Ephraim ben Shulamit, Rabbanit Sarah bat Anat, Orit bat Ilana, Talia bat Sarah, Yitro ben Avraham, David ben Esriya, Doris bat Jora, Joshua ben Noach, Alex ben Noach, and also for a Atzlacha Rabba for Marsha bat Julie, Ayla bat Marsha, Samuel ben Marsha, Cephas ben Marsha, Alexander ben Marsha, Louis ben Marsha, Shaul ben Farzane, Reuven Chaim ben Pala Parel, Netanel Yosef ben Avraham, Yitro ben Avraham, David ben Esriya, Oshri ben Doris, Gabi ben Doris, Elad ben Doris, and all of Am Yisrael and all of the righteous Noahites that continue to support all the things that we're doing, Baruch Hashem, to help the world, to help Klal Yisrael, Baruch Hashem, get closer and closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through thick and thin. So, BeEzrat HaShem, in the next day or two, we're going to publicize another heartbreaking video of someone that we know and really a very precious human being, very precious Jew in Eretz Yisrael, Rav Sharf, Mordechai Sharf, and he is one of these people that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given him a lot of major tests, a lot of very big difficulties, and he's asking for our help to wed his daughter. Our organization already helps him with financially to eat. He has a family of 19 between him, his kids, his grandkids, and so on, and pretty much it seems like everything is on his head. So already it's very difficult to say the least, but recently he had a major work accident where he lost a couple of fingers, and he lost his job, and now the ability to wed his daughter is up in the air, and his daughter is really a Baalat Chesed, a fantastic human being that takes care of two young people that are of special needs. And this is one of the many projects that our organization takes on behind the scenes of just doing chesed to try to help as many people as possible. So everything I just said is going to be in a video, but in addition, you'll see him, you'll hear his voice, and you'll hear him. He wants us to share this. It's a heartbreaking video because you're hearing a grown man cry. Pleading for help from people, and it's one of those things where on one end you're thinking, to share it, so perhaps some people open up their hearts and their wallets, but on the other hand, it's never a wonderful thing to hear, just because you don't like to see Jews in bad shape. But of course, this is necessary. The point is, the video is not just to also help him, but also to help others. There are many cases like this that we try to help people when we can, whether it's food for Shabbat or for the holidays, or surgeries, different types of things that we try to help, and we also try to help people that we know are doing good for the world, even sometimes if they're not Jewish. Just last week we helped a Noahide organization in Africa that needs to get some material for the students, and you're talking about people that are studying outside with their most prized possession was a chalkboard that in America at best maybe is worth $20. So I mean, these young kids, you see them learning and everything. It's you want to help, and of course some of these things are $100, $200, and some of them are thousands of dollars, but the key is, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends you somebody, that there's a reason for it. There's a reason for it. Especially if the people are people that fear Hashem and learn Torah and do mitzvot. And if you have the ability to help, you help. And sometimes we do personally, sometimes the organization, sometimes both. The key is to try to make ourselves the vessel that Hashem continues to use to spread the goodness of the Torah. And of course, this is one of the things that helps Hashem have a reason to give us more parnasah, to give the people that donate more parnasah, to help us continue growing and doing all the things that He wants us to do, but at the same token, do it even on a larger scale. So this is one of the things you'll see in a couple of days. The reason why it's taking a little time is just simply we want to put the subtitles for the words that he said. With that being said, we're going to go straight into the shiur because there's a lot of material. And we see that the Chazon Ish, over the last few shiurim, the last few sections of this sefer called Emunah veBitachon, obviously go into the depth of the ideology of a Jew, which is not just to have Emunah and Bitachon theoretically, but actually the understanding what is Emunah and Bitachon and what is really a Jew, what is the ideology of a Jew. And for the last several shiurim, he's explained to us that the most critical part is the understanding of where the priorities lie. Where is the most important part? Where is the halacha stand? Where is MUSSAR stand? Where is emunah? Where is everything has to have a certain priority list that a person needs to know, because many times you'll see, people mean to do good, but unfortunately end up doing evil, and it's not always on purpose. You have a person wants to go and feed the poor, but he's going to end up driving on Shabbat to do it. Obviously, this is not allowed because you're not allowed to drive on Shabbat. But the key is to know how to utilize the halacha, how to use the law itself, the Torah itself, in a way where you can do good, but good that is favorable in the eye of Hashem. There was actually a person that at the time Rabbi Ovadia alav Shalom was in Egypt as the rabbi over there, and this person, got a bunch of write-ups by different rabbanim, and he wanted to do KIRUV. He wanted to help people learn more Torah, so he got some write-ups from different rabbis, from different countries, from different books, and he made a very, very nice newsletter. And he wanted to give it out to the people. So what did he do? He decided that he's going to give it out to them on Shabbat. Now, of course, what else do you want? You want people to learn Torah. And what better day is there to learn Torah on Shabbat, where Chachamim say that if a person understood the magnitude of how much reward they're going to get for learning Torah, they simply could multiply that by 1,000, and some say much more than 1,000 if they learn that Torah on Shabbat. This is the reason why Rabbi Ovadia himself used to learn Torah on Shabbat without sleeping. And many other Chachamim would learn Torah, extraordinary amounts of Torah on Shabbat. And this person wanted people in Egypt to learn Torah. He wanted the Jewish people of Egypt, at the time there were many Jews over there, he wanted them to learn Torah, and what's a better way? By giving them already prepared material in his extraordinary newsletter. What's the problem with this? What could be the problem? The problem is that at that time there was no IRUV. There was no IRUV in Egypt, which means that you were not allowed to carry. If you're in a community and there is no IRUV, then you're not allowed to carry anything on Shabbat. You're not allowed to carry even your own baby. You're not allowed to walk around with a baby carriage. And surely you're not allowed to carry your talit or a newsletter or siddur. Not allowed to carry. And at a place where there is a certain distance, or there's a certain amount of people, 600,000 people, the Chachamim consider it even a biblical violation. So here this person is trying to give people Torah to learn, and he figures that, listen, since it's Torah, even though there's no Yeruv, he knew what an Yeruv is, but even though there's no Yeruv, at least it's Torah, at least they're going to learn Torah, and if they're going to carry, let them at least carry Torah. Logically, this makes all the sense in the world. Halachically, it's 100% forbidden. So Rabbi Ovadia rebuked this person for doing such a thing. He says, yes, you want to help them do a mitzvah, but in a way of sin. And we have a rule in the Torah, en mitzvah ba ba'avera. we're not allowed to do mitzvot in a way of making sin. You can't say, listen, I'm going to go and do a mitzvah, but in the process I'm going to sin. There's no such thing. That's permitted according to the Torah. Now, of course, you're going to say, but what about if, let's say, somebody is sick, or there's a medical emergency, and what do? Do you take him to the hospital on Shabbat and drive or not? Yes, you take him to the hospital on Shabbat, and that's actually the mitzvah. Why? Because pikuach nefesh doche et Torah. Pikuach nefesh, when there's a life risk, that's what pikuach nefesh is. The Torah is put on hold. Torah is put on hold, and so it's not that you are allowed to violate Shabbat. It's that Shabbat is put on hold until there's no longer a life risk. So once you take the person in a car or a plane or whatever way, you have to get him to get treated. You take him to get the attention that he needs to get and to remove the life risk. Automatically, as soon as that life risk ends, the Shabbat is turned back on automatically. And for a person that's a non-professional, a person that's, let's say, just a friend or family or a person in the community that drove that person to the hospital, they're not allowed to drive back because Shabbat is already back on. So they can't drive back on. And there's obviously Chachamim that say that the doctors that have to work on Shabbat when there are situations of life risk, they're allowed to come back, because if we would tell them that every time they would have to put their Shabbat on hold, they would never be able to come back, they would, it would disincentivize them, disincentivize them to actually do this to help people and save lives, and it costs the lives of people. So doctors that are professionals are allowed to come back, but everybody else has to stay at the hospital until the end of Shabbat. So here we see just a small, tiny example, of how halacha actually works. And here the Chazon Ish is trying to explain to us that a person can be the nicest person in the world, but if they are violating the halacha, they're not going to be viewed favorably in the Torah. They're not going to be viewed favorably in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is also the reason why in last week's parasha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, through the mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu, tells us exactly what he expects every single one of us. And this actually was one of the sections in the parasha, is one of the parshiot that we say every single day. In Shema Yisrael, it's one of the parashiyot that you have in the Tefillin, where it says, "Vayayim shamoa tishmeu el mitzvotai asher anochi metzaveh etchem hayom, le'avah et Adonai Elohechem ule'avdo b'kol levavchem u'kol nafshechem." So it says in chapter 11, verse number 13, it says, it starts a whole paragraph, "And it will be that if you hearken to my commandments that I command you today, to love Hashem your God, and to serve Him with all of your heart and with all of your soul, then I shall provide rain for your land in its proper time, the early and the later rains, that you may gather in your grain, your wine, and your oil. I shall provide," and it continues, verse 15, "I shall provide grass in your field and your cattle," and it goes into all the different blessings that a person would get for following the Torah, for following the halacha. But on the other hand, this very same paragraph that we read every single day in Shema Yisrael, also continues in verse number 17, says, if you restrain the heaven, it continues, beware for yourselves in verse 16, beware for yourselves lest your heart be seduced, and you turn astray and serve gods of others, and prostrate yourselves to them. And of course, we already learned that idolatry is not just a statue or yoshke. Idolatry could sometimes be money. Idolatry can sometimes be sports. Idolatry can be a person. Idolatry could even be a rabbi if you're idolizing your rabbi in a forbidden way. So if we turn into idolatry, then the wrath of Hashem will blaze against you. He will restrain the heaven, so there will be no rain, and the ground will not yield its produce, and you will be swiftly banished from the goodly land that Hashem gives you. You shall place these words of mine upon your heart and upon your soul. You shall bind them for a sign upon your arm, and let them be an ornament between your eyes. This is also the mitzvah of tefillin for men. that men have to put on tefillin, and this tefillin is, in essence, the recognition of our acceptance of this specific mitzvah, not only to follow the halacha, but also to be acknowledge the warning that if we don't, unfortunately, there is a judgment for that, both in this world and the next. So that's why it's always baffling when you hear sometimes people that claim to be knowledgeable of Torah, whether rabbis or not, say that there's no punishment in this world and Hashem doesn't punish, He loves everybody, when clearly we read it every single day in Shema Yisrael. Clearly it's in your tefillin. Clearly it's in the arm, it's in the head, it's supposed to be in your neshama too. And in essence, when a person says there's no punishment in this world, there's no punishment in the next world, it obviously shows that these people either are completely clueless or they're biased in such a fashion that they have forgotten what the Torah actually says, or they're ignoring it altogether. Either way, the key is to know that to follow this commandment of loving Hashem and serving Him with all of our hearts, with all of our resources, and so on, obviously requires instructions. It requires instructions because how are we going to know, first and foremost, how do we put this on our arm and our leg? There's no place in the entire Torah that's going to tell you the details of how a tefillin is supposed to look. So if you say put it on the arm, put it on the leg, maybe I should tattoo it. Maybe I should put it in a little tube and put it on my finger. So of course the oral Torah comes in and tells us exactly all of the halachot, which is there's over 1,000 halachot, 1,000 laws pertaining to the making of tefillin. To the making of tefillin. That's why I always tell people, don't buy tefillin from just anybody. You have to buy it from someone that you know who the scribe is, and the scribe is someone that has yirat shamayim, has fear of the Almighty, is an expert in the halacha, and is not someone that's just selling it to you for a discount. Rule of thumb is, don't buy it from anybody you don't know, or at least does not have somebody else that's reliable that knows that person. Which i.e. means buying it on eBay, buying it on Amazon, buying it from some store that claims that they're good just because their price is very high is never a good idea. You always want to make sure that you buy tefillin from a good place where the sofer is someone that is reliable and is an expert on halacha, and also is someone that makes good quality tefillin. And good quality tefillin, in the eyes of some people, may seem expensive. If you're going to buy good quality tefillin, you're talking about $1,000 and higher. You're not going to buy a good quality tefillin for $200, $300. That most likely is not even kosher. We've seen a few things where you see people say, yeah, I bought this tefillin for $300. You open up the tefillin, you see a newspaper inside. In some cases, you see a cross. So, of course, you have to understand that if you buy a tefillin from a non-kosher source, and you put on the tefillin every single day for 10 years, and then one day you discover those tefillin are not kosher, that means that for 10 years, you were sinning every single day. You were not making a mitzvah. Even though you didn't know they were not kosher, it's still not considered a mitzvah. Why? The onus is on you to verify that what you're doing is 100% correct. Hence the reason why you're commanded to love Hashem. Love Hashem meaning love His mitzvot. Don't just look for a discount when it comes to His mitzvot, but when it comes to getting a new house or a new car or a new anything else, you're willing to splurge. This is really, really important when it comes to doing mitzvot, to make sure that we realize that the reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us money is so we buy good things with it. Good things doesn't just mean good things like cars and houses, but good things also means the mitzvot. Get yourself a good quality tefillin, good quality talit, good quality mezuzot. It baffles me sometimes when people tell me, listen, I need a mezuzah, but I have something in my house. Okay, where did you get it from? Oh, I don't really remember. I think the rabbi, had something in the some giveaway box, and he said anyone that wants to take it, I could take it, and I took one. I said, okay, but did you ever get him checked? No, getting it checked is $20. I don't feel like checking 20 mezuzot. Wait, so you have 20 rooms in your house, but you don't want to spend a few $100s to make sure that they're, actually kosher mezuzot? Or the best yet is when people say, listen, we already checked one mezuzah and we verified that it's not kosher. Should we continue checking, or maybe we could just leave it and it's going to be okay? People take such risk and then they're surprised that tragedy happens or all types of problems happen. There's a very famous story that Rav Gross, Rabbi Yitzchak Gross, writes in his book called A Living Legend, highly recommended. And he himself, extraordinary Talmid Chacham, comes from an empire of Talmidei Chachamim. His father was one of the Gdolei Ador. And Rabbi Yitzchak Gross, he says that one time he had his daughter got an infection on her eye. She got an infection on her eye, and no matter what they would do, what kind of medicine they would use, nothing worked. And this infection got worse and worse by the day, to the point of literally, practically deforming her face. And this was a real tragedy. She's obviously embarrassed, she's in pain, agony, nightmare. Now he's going to all types of doctors, and no one can do anything. Now, one time he decided that he's going to go to a doctor in America, because he was going to a trip to raise some money for his extraordinary organization in Eretz Yisrael. And he's going to go to a well-known doctor in America. And he goes to the doctor, and he brings with him a huge file. He brings with him a huge file, the entire medical file, to bring to the doctor. Now the doctor says, I need to see your daughter. I need to see your daughter. I can't just look at this, I have to see also the daughter. So, immediately, they fly in the daughter. They fly in the daughter, she's there, and of course this was such a painful trip for her. To go on a plane when you have such agony and infection and so on is never a fun thing, I know from experience. Don't try this at home if you don't have to. And the daughter comes, the doctor sees that the file is an understatement for the condition, and he says to Rav Gross, I need 3 days, and then I'll give you an answer. And this is a world-renowned doctor, what kind of procedure we can do, what we can do, how we can do it. It's not going to be an easy thing, but I need to think about it and review it with some of my peers over the next 3 days. So, Rav Gross, who his wife is a Hasidah of Chabad, decides to go and visit the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, the most recent one, and he knew that the Lubavitcher Rebbe every single day would arrive to 770 and to pray, and at the same exact time, and everybody would make like people would want to see him when he's coming in, and the men would be on one side, the women would be on the other side, and he would simply cross with a few of his people in the middle. Now, and everyone obviously appreciates tzaddikim, wanted to see the tzaddik first thing in the morning, was nothing better than that. And he said, I'm going to go talk to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So they went, they knew exactly what time it was, waiting. The Lubavitcher Rebbe arrives, and as he gets out of the car and he starts walking towards the door, Rav Gross does something only a father would do. Only a father would do. What does he do? He gets out of the line and goes in the middle and blocks the way of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Goes like this. And obviously the Lubavitcher Rebbe sees him, and he knows, obviously, this is an emergency. This is not, listen, I want a blessing, maybe I can make some more money, or I have a question about halacha. This is an emergency. This is not something that you do. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe looks at him, he says, no. And the Rav Gross points to his daughter, who's standing there on the side with the rest of the women, and he points to his daughter. He says, her. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who is not a person that is typically looking at women or anything, his eyes were holy, obviously, but nonetheless, he sees there's something there, and he looks at his daughter, and he sees his daughter's deformed face, a much deformed face, infection all over the side, something that the Rav Gross says, you can't even describe it in words. And literally within a second, Mamash Ruach HaKodesh, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says to Rav Gross, check your mezuzah. That's it. That's all he said. He didn't say, listen, let me think. Amash, Ruach HaKodesh. Says to Rav Gos, check your mezuzah. Rav Gos understood. Chacham says something, we do. That's what a person has emunat chachamim does. We don't ask 50 questions. Why did you say this? Maybe it's this. I don't agree. Somebody else. The chacham said, that's all I do. Gets out of the line, calls his wife in Eretz Yisrael, immediately says, get someone to check the mezuzot right away. Immediately. Immediately, they go, they check, and ishtabach shimo la'ad. The bedroom where his daughter is sleeping, they check the mezuzah, and they see that the word I in there, has a missing letter. In the mezuzah. Got wiped out, or with temperature, whatever it is. Sometimes that happens over time. Got wiped out. Immediately, they changed the mezuzah. And Rav Gos writes in his book, the effect was so miraculous, literally within 24 hours. Something that they've been suffering, the girl's been suffering, the whole family is suffering through for, I think, something close to a year. In 24 hours, it healed. 24 hours later, she wakes up in the morning, the whole thing is gone. And he says, we still have an appointment with the doctor. I want to take you to the doctor. He takes his daughter to the doctor. The doctor's looking at him. He looks at the file. He looks at the daughter. He looks at the file. He looks at him. He looks at the daughter. He looks at the file. No. He says, emunat chachamim. That event gave the doctor such chizuk, he did complete tshuva. The doctor did complete tshuva. He says, this is 100% a miracle. I was going to tell you, there's almost nothing to be done. We don't know. We could try some procedures, which will probably be torture for your daughter. But nonetheless, this though, in 24 hours, not possible. According to medicine, it's not possible. Why? Kosher mezuzah. Kosher mezuzah, Rabotai Yekarim, doesn't only work if you are sleeping in the same room. To have a kosher mezuzah as onkelos, in the Gemara in Masechet Avodah Zarah, says to the Romaim that came over there, says to the Romans that came to arrest him, he says to them, my kosher mezuzah, my mezuzah doesn't just protect me when I'm inside the house. My mezuzah also protects me when I'm outside of the house. Unlike your king that is scared and is hiding inside his kingdom over there and needs you to protect him on the outside, my king doesn't need me to protect him. My king, if I put the mezuzah and it's a good mezuzah, my king protects me inside my house and outside my house. This is why it baffles me sometimes when people are so unaware of the power of Torah, that they simply just choose to not believe, choose to ignore, choose to do a lot of different things, but really to their own detriment. And all of these people that are so-called rationalists, that speak against the supernatural and the miracles, apparently they never lived a single day of a life of a Jew. Every single Jew experiences miracles every single day. Some are as great as the one we just talked about. Some seem like they're smaller, but the Ramban says there is no big or small. Everything is a miracle. And so when people tell you that they're against mystical teachings and all types of mysticism and miracles, it simply means these people, perhaps we should question whether they're even Jewish. Because a Jewish neshama knows that the only reason why there is a Jewish people is because it is a miracle. The fact that we still are here in the world, and all of the tormentors that we had, all of the destroyers that we had, all of the enemies that we had, the greatest civilizations that in size and power that ever existed, all of them tried to destroy us. Every single one with no exception. Every single one, whether it's the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Greeks and the Romans and the Spaniards and the Turks, every one of them tried to destroy us. Every one of them. And yet, none of them are here and we're here. What is that? The good luck? No, it's 100% a miracle. But in order to earn these types of miracles, a person doesn't necessarily need to be Jewish. These miracles also sometimes happens to non-Jews. But to be aware that this is a miracle from Hashem, a person needs to be glued to the Torah, glued to the halacha, glued to what it says in the Torah to understand what is the Torah. To just read the Torah like it's some storybook, chas v'shalom. To read it like, oh, we like the narration, we like these people, this is my favorite character, like it's some type of comic book, that's not going to earn you any brownie points in Shamayim. So that's why the Chazon Ish has been emphasizing the critical nature of actually understanding how important halacha is. Because if you know it and you live by it, your life turns into one big miracle. Your understanding of the problems in your life turns into something that you know is worth something very valuable. This is why a person needs to know halacha. But at the same token, to just know halacha, know the laws without knowing how to apply them, which comes from MUSSAR, of course, it's going to be to no avail. To know just MUSSAR, to know ethics, but not know the actual rules, again, also will be to no avail. It will be somebody that wants to do something good, like giving out a Torah newsletter, but in an area that there's no KIRUV. So he wants to do something good, but by doing that something good, he's causing everybody to sin. So of course a person needs to know both. Now the question is, who are the great among us? Who are the greatest Jews? Everybody likes to think that they know the greatest people. This guy, he invented something. That guy, he's a good speaker. This guy, he is very successful and donates a lot. But in reality, who are the greatest Jews? Who are the greatest Jews? Now, of course, in order to be the greatest Jew, you have to identify yourself as someone that's Jewish according to what Judaism is. If you consider yourself Jewish just because your mother is Jewish, but you yourself are desecrating Shabbat, you're not keeping kosher, you're not keeping really anything, in reality, there's nothing that's making you Jewish. There's nothing that's making you Jewish. A lot of times people say, no, I'm just as Jewish as you are, even though I don't keep the Torah. Question is, how? What makes you Jewish? Now, if you're going to say, no, because my mom is Jewish. Yeah, but your mom is Jewish, making you a Jew, that's according to the same Torah that you're desecrating. So you can't tell me that you believe in the Torah, and that Torah is the one that's making you Jewish, when at the same time you're going against the Torah. So, in reality, what makes you Jewish? If you're going to say, yeah, but I eat Jewish food. You know, I'm Sephardi, I eat such and such food. I'm Ashkenazi, I eat such and such food. Habibi, a lot of non-Jews eat that food too. Does that make them Jewish also? No. What makes a person Jewish? If they follow what the Torah says. If they follow the actual halacha. If they follow what the halacha is. What is the law? Now, in order to know who the greatest Jews are, the Chazon Ish goes into it and gives us many sources. And he says, in chapter 3, section number 21, in the Gemara Masechet Kiddushin, page 49b, it says, if someone engages himself to a woman on the condition that I am a Torah scholar, one does not say that he must be like Shimon ben Azai in order for the engagement to take effect. And if he says, on the condition that I am wise, one does not say that he has to be as wise as the sages of Yavne, as Rabbi Akiva and his companions. So, first, let's explain this first part. In the Gemara Masechet Kiddushin, we learn that there's a whole sugya over there, where, say, a Jew wants to take another Jewish woman to be his wife, and he says, be my wife, but there has to be some type of kinyan, there has to be some type of exchange, not just words, there has to be some type of exchange. It says, be my wife, now if he gives her ring, he gives her a pruta, and she takes it, that's it, she's his wife. That's in essence the first part. But if he doesn't have it, he says, be my wife on the condition that I am a Torah scholar. I'm a condition of a Torah scholar. The Gemara goes and elaborates, what if he's not a Torah scholar? What if he's a complete ignoramus? Says, if he's going to work towards it, he's going to start learning and so on and so forth, then once he becomes, then this actually becomes, this takes effect. But the Gemara says, but if he uses this type of, which obviously is not applicable today, people don't do this anymore today, because we don't live necessarily in a world of Torah like it used to be in those days. But nonetheless, if a person was going to say, marry me on the condition that I am a Torah scholar, he doesn't say that I'm a Torah scholar that is like Shimon ben Azai, or that I'm wise like Rabbi Akiva. Why not those two? Why not those two? Because Shimon ben Azai was one of the Tanaim, and so was Rabbi Akiva. And these were two of the greatest of their generation, and thereafter, and some even say before, in certain aspects. They were something out of this world. And in so many words, somebody says that marry me on the condition that I am going to be a Torah scholar like Shimon ben Azai. In essence, you're saying, oh, this guy is delusional. Why? There's no chance for him to be like Shimon ben Azai. If he says, marry me on the condition that I'm wise like Rabbi Akiva, this person needs to be instituted. Why? It's not possible for him to be like Rabbi Akiva. Simply not. Simply not. If he says, I'll be a Torah scholar, yeah, that's possible. That means he perhaps does have all of his marbles in his head, and it is very possible that he becomes wise and he becomes a Torah scholar. If he applies himself, he can be. But if he says, no, on the condition that I'll be the greatest sage of the generation, no, we know that this person is not serious. So the Chazon Ish uses this particular example of how these two Chachamim are specified, and not everybody else. They're not mentioning other people. They're not mentioning other sages, even though there were many great sages. Many great sages that we've mentioned in the shiurim, and we'll continue mentioning in shiurim. But none of them were used, rather these two, and in multiple places. So the Chazon Ish says, from here we see that in the memory of our sages, the outstanding sages were Ben Azai and Rabbi Akiva. That the sages themselves, in their mind, the greatest were these two, Ben Azai and Rabbi Akiva. Ben Azai and Rabbi Akiva. Now you may ask, how come Ben Azai, Shimon ben Azai, is not called Rabbi Shimon ben Azai, and Rabbi Akiva is called Rabbi Akiva? Why? The Gemara elaborates on that when a person is identified simply by his name in those times, he's even greater than a rabbi. His position is even greater. Like you have Yeshua ben Nun, or you have Jeremiah, or you have Isaiah. They were not, even though sometimes they're called Rebbe from the people, but they're identified by their first name. Why? Because their name is even greater than the title. Their name is even greater than the title. This is also the reason why Moshe is called Moshe Rabbeinu, rather than Rabbeinu Moshe. The title comes after his name. Why? Because his name was even greater than the title of Rabbeinu. But this doesn't necessarily mean that Ben Azai was greater than Rabbi Akiva. It's just that Shimon ben Azai was identified without the title of rabbi. But they were both extraordinary sages. And it says here that in 3 places in the Gemara, the Chazon Ish says, we find that the sages say the statement, I am like Ben Azai. And remember, the Chazon Ish is not using, there's no computer in this age of Chazon Ish. So he knows the entire Gemara practically by heart. And he says, 3 places in the Gemara, it mentions this statement. Today, even with a computer, I don't think you could probably find it so easily. But nonetheless, the minds of the sages is not like an ordinary genius mind. And not only after you learn their Torah, do you start understanding how different the mind of the sages are versus a regular genius, among the nations. So he says that in 3 places in the Gemara, the sages themselves use the statement, I am like Ben Azai. In the Gemara, Masechet Eruvin, page 29a, in Masechet Sotah, page 45a, in Masechet Kiddushin, page 20a. And in all of them, the disciples of these sages made use of this statement, which showed that the speaker was experiencing a moment of enlightenment, in order to question them on matters of halakha. One of the Chachamim, one of the disciples of Ben Azai, Rabbi Akiva, was speaking to the others. They were questioning him about specific things. And at times, in this 3 specific times, they said, I am like Ben Azai. You're asking me a question, I'm like Ben Azai. Meaning that right now I have so much divine assistance, so much siyata dishmaya, you can ask me anything and I'll give you as clear an answer as Ben Azai. They didn't use this freely whenever they felt like it to show off. But sometimes a person is so in tune with the Torah that they have this siyata dishmaya that you could literally ask them anything you want and they'll give you not only an answer, but an answer that's clear that even a 6-year-old could understand. And this is what they were in essence saying. Right now, I'm like Ben Azai. So they were like the example of all examples of enlightenment, example of all examples of clarity of Torah, and example of all examples of the knowledge of Torah. And from this, we learn that when the greatness of Ben Azai is mentioned, without specifying what sort of greatness, it means his greatness in halacha. So the question is, why? What was he so great in? Maybe he was good at telling stories. Maybe he was great at congregating a community to pray with a minyan. Maybe he was great at raising money, building institutions, giving MUSSAR. Where was he great at? Chamim said, no. His greatness that's constantly mentioned is his greatness in halacha. And what's the proof? It says in one of the sources, when Rava, which is one of the later sages that's practically mentioned in every page in the Gemara, when Rava said, I am like Ben Azai, he was pressed upon to prove that he was extremely well versed in the laws of KIRUV, which is laws pertaining to setting domains. Like I mentioned before in the story of Rav Ovadia, to make an KIRUV, you can't just decide, listen, this is a KIRUV and that's it, and just walk away. You have to follow the rules of how to make an KIRUV, specific things, specific places, specific conditions. And he was asked, Rava says that I am like Ben Azai. When they asked him, well, are you sure? And they asked him, he said, I'm like Ben Azai. And he says, I can answer any questions. So what they start asking him? They start asking him some of the most difficult halachic questions. The questions in regards to KIRUV are some of the most difficult questions. Many say that Masechet KIRUV is the most difficult Masechet in the Gemara, in the Shas. And he started giving them the details of KIRUV, of setting domains for Shabbat. And he was then asked how many apples are needed in order to constitute a meal that sets a domain. Now, without learning a little bit of Gemara, a person is not going to have a clue what are they talking. What does an apple have anything to do with anything? So part of making an KIRUV is to have meals. There has to be meals in specified locations, as if you are, in essence, and I'm oversimplifying it, but as if you are in the same house. So, for example, you have there's, let's say, two friends, and they want to go back and forth to each other's house on Shabbat, but there's no KIRUV, and they want to make an KIRUV between each other, so they have to put a meal in the two houses, as if they are both one of the same houses. Again, I'm oversimplifying it. Do not use just this to decide that you have an KIRUV in your community. You want to make one, you have to follow many other intricate details and know a lot of other intricate details. But the question is that the Chachamim are asking them, but what if they don't have bread? What if they don't have bread? Can they use apples? He says, yes, you can use apples. Well, how many apples? Meaning, how many apples constitute a meal, a shiur of a meal? And you have to have 2 meals. So he had to give them the exact answer of how many apples constitute 2 meals. And this clarity of the halacha doesn't only require him to know the law itself, but the law of specific conditions, the weight of the apples, all types of intricate details that literally you needed siyata dishmaya to know them in general, needless to say, to know it all by heart. Then he gives another example. The Chazon Ish gives another example that when Abaye, one of the other great sages in the Gemara that's in practically every page, constantly debating with in the Gemara, when Abaye made this statement, he was pressed upon to prove that he knew the laws of the Igla Rufa, which is the laws pertaining to a murdered person. that was found outside of the city, and was asked about the case of two bodies found, one on top of the other. So, again, if you read this on the surface, no idea what's going on. So we'll explain a little bit. If there is chas v'shalom, a person that this is a biblical mitzvah, and this is in the Torah, and it's called the Eglah Rufa, the laws of the Eglah Rufa, which is if there is a person that is not part of the town, it's not part of your community, but he perhaps passed by the community, and chas v'shalom, somebody murdered him. Now, when the murderer obviously is not found, but they find the body. But the body is right on the border of two cities. It's right on the border of two cities. One Jewish city next to the other city. So how do you decide which city is the one responsible for it? Which city is responsible for it? Once the Chachamim come and determine which city is responsible for it by following specific rules, then they take a gla and they kill it, not slaughter it in a kosher way, but rather hit it in the back of the neck. In essence, it's a rebuke to the community. Nonetheless, it's and they're responsible for the body. But the question is, if they asked Abaye not just about this, he knew the traditional halacha. They said, but what if you find two bodies, one on top of the other, exactly in the same place, one on top of the other? How do you decide if one is closer to the other one, the details, which one comes first? Maybe it's in a hill, maybe it's in a ditch. There's a lot of intricate details. It's not so simple. So when Abaye was answering these questions, he says, I'm like Ben Azai, meaning even a question like this, no problem, I can answer you, as difficult as it may be. In the Chazon Ish continues, saying that in the Gemara Masechet Bechorot, page 58a, it's asked, wasn't Ben Azai capable of determining which of the two opinions brought there is right? Does it not say in the Bereita that Ben Azai says that all of the sages of Israel are like a piece of garlic skin next to him, except for the bald one, which he's referring to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva's name among the sages was the bald one. So we see that Ben Azai was speaking of his own greatness in halacha, specifically, that he must have known the halachot of the tithe of the livestock. So this is again another one of the examples that the Gemara brings. Where when they asked Ben Azai, are you sure about this specific things? Because some of the sages disagree with you. Ben Azai says to them, all of these sages that you're telling me their opinions, they're like a peel next to me as far as the clarity that I have about what the rule is. Except for Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, we're on the same level. If he disagrees, I have to evaluate what he says. But the rest of the one that you mentioned, even though they're all good people, they're all chachamim, they're all tzaddikim, they're all great, but when it comes to this specific rule, they're all like a garlic peel next to me. So here we also see that the chachamim, although they were very modest and very humble, they also knew where they stood. This is also one of the misunderstandings that people have about when it says that Moshe Rabbeinu was anav mikol adam, that he was the most humble man that ever lived, that even if he saw a person that has tzarat, that has both the spiritual and a physical disease called tzarat, he would still see the good in him, and see that this good in him is better in some aspects from Moshe Rabbeinu. This doesn't mean that Moshe Rabbeinu, chas v'shalom, thought that he was a loser of some kind, because we see that when he rebukes the people in all of the entire book of Deuteronomy, the entire book of Deuteronomy is a period of 36 days, that Moshe Rabbeinu is rebuking Am Yisrael week after week, the last 36 days of his life. And that was the book of Deuteronomy. And we see that when he talks to them, he's not talking to them in a position of weakness, chas v'shalom. He's talking to them with strength. He's talking to them with confidence. He knew exactly where he stood. But this did not make him arrogant over them. This did not make him think that he is better than everybody else. He knew exactly where he stood, he knew exactly what his position was, and so on. And that's also one of the things that people misunderstand. They think that humility means that you have to start thinking of yourself as a loser. This is not the case. This is as far from the case as possible. At the same token, some people will understand, okay, so I'm allowed to be proud of myself and show off my stuff. Also not true. Also not correct. A person needs to know there are certain things that you're allowed to be proud of, and you should be proud of, but there's a way to be proud. And for that, we discussed a little bit more in detail in our series of the Igeret Agra. The Ramban wrote a letter with it. There's many details of humility and so on. I highly recommend for anyone who hasn't watched that series to watch it. But the point here is that we see that Ben Azai knew exactly where he stood, but at the same token, he wasn't delusional. He wasn't delusional to think, no, I'm better than everyone, which is unfortunately what happens today on a regular basis, where someone who's not even better than the guy next to him, but he thinks he's better than everybody. So he's saying, listen, and it comes to this specific rule, I'm as expert as it gets. The rest of these opinions that you gave me, they're like the peel of an onion. But if you bring me something from Rabbi Akiva, that's something else. Also note that Ben Azai is one of the 4 Chachamim that went to the Pardes. There's a very famous Gemara in Masechet Chagiga where you had several Chachamim go into the upper worlds. And one of them was Rabbi Akiva. He went there and came back enlightened. One of them was Elisha ben Avuya, who was called also Achel. He went there and he got confused and became a heretic as a result. And Ben Azai went there and he was so glued to the Shekhinah that he lost his desire to live. He didn't want to leave there and he ended up dying. And one other Chacham went there and went crazy. Got damaged. So those 4 Chachamim went to the Pardes. So Ben Azai was, once he went to the Pardes, felt the Shekhinah in a way that's indescribable, had no desire to live anymore, and he ended up staying there. Ended up dying. So this Ben Azai Kadosh says that when it comes to specific things, he knew exactly where he stood. Now, when it comes to Rabbi Akiva, on the other hand, the Chazon Ish brings a Gemara in Masechet Menachot, page 29a, where it says a story that is a well-known story, that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, showed Moshe Rabbeinu all of the generations. At Mount Sinai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed Moshe Rabbeinu the Torah and a lot of different things. And also, at some point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed Moshe Rabbeinu all of the generations that will live, everything that happened in the past, and everything that will happen in the future, all the generations that will be, until Mashiach comes. And at one point, he shows him Rabbi Akiva. How does he show him Rabbi Akiva? He sits Moshe Rabbeinu in the class of Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva is teaching his students in the class all types of halachas, all types of secrets from the crowns of the letters. Anyone that's familiar with the Ashuri script, the Ashuri writings, like you have a Sefer Torah, you'll see that the Hebrew letters are not like the ones that you see in on the internet or in some type of letter, but rather the letters have like these points coming out of them, these little crowns coming out of them. Sometimes they actually literally look like a crown, all types of things coming out of them. Now these are called the crowns. In English, they're called the crowns of the letters. And Rabbi Akiva was already at such a high level, he was at the 50th level of Kedusha, that he found different intricate details, secrets, and halachas that you can learn from these secrets, from these different crowns. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows Moshe Rabbeinu this. Moshe Rabbeinu is not familiar with what he's teaching. He just received the Torah. He received the Torah himself from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but he sees that someone is teaching Torah, but he has no idea what he's saying. He's confused. And Moshe Rabbeinu started feeling bad, started feeling self-conscious, until Rabbi Akiva says at the end of the lesson, and everything that I just taught you comes from Moshe Misinai, comes from Moshe Rabbeinu, meaning that all I did is continue to extrapolate from what Moshe Rabbeinu taught us already at Mount Sinai. I didn't teach you anything that was not given to Moshe Rabbeinu. I just continued to extrapolate it, continue to delve deeper and deeper into it, which is the goal of the Chachamim. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the Torah, He gave us at Mount Sinai, He gave us the written Torah at Mount Sinai up to Parashat Yitro, which is the parasha of the Matan Torah, because the Torah was given to the same generation that it's written about. So He didn't give them the written Torah until the end of the Torah, because then they would know the future, then they would know that they would sin. In essence, He would make the choice for them. So obviously, He didn't give them the entire Torah. He gave them up to Parashat Yitro, and He gave them the oral Torah. But the two major points that are critical to understand about Him giving them the written Torah and the oral Torah is that if you go to the Gemara in Masechet Chagiga, you'll see that over there it says that Hashem wrote the Torah 974 generations before He created the world. Before He created the world, already the Torah was written. So the most common question is, wait, if He already wrote the entire Torah, meaning you not only have the oral Torah, which was delivered orally until the generation of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, so few thousand years after the world was created, over 1,000 years after Moshe Rabbeinu got the written Torah, so many, many years. But this oral Torah remained oral for a long time. But this Torah was also at creation. But then it also talks about that the written Torah is something that Hashem wrote with black fire on white fire. Symbolic of the Sefer Torah that you see in your synagogue is symbolic of the original Torah, where the scroll is white and the writing is always black. It can never be blue, it can't be green, it can't be other color. Can't highlight it. This is the Torah scroll. Your Chumash, you're allowed to highlight it, you're allowed to write something on the margins, as long as you're not erasing any letters. If you actually have, let's say, a Sidul or a Chumash, and you see that perhaps there's a printing error and one of the letters is cut off, you're allowed to complete that letter because it's a Chumash. But if it's a Torah scroll, it has to be done in a different way. But nonetheless, this original Torah that was written in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's, in essence, realm, was black fire on white fire. And this was the written Torah. And anytime someone writes a Torah scroll, the halacha is they have to copy it from an existing Sefer Torah. They can't do it from memory. You're not allowed to do it from memory. You have to be looking at another Torah scroll when you're writing a Torah scroll. That's the halacha. So it's important to know these specific rules. If someone's going to write a Sefer Torah, they need to know obviously all of the halachot. This is also the reason why the Gaon Mivilna told his wife in the Igeret Agra that teach the kids the Chumash to the point where they almost know the entire Chumash by heart. Why almost know the entire Chumash by heart? Because we don't want them to know the whole thing by heart, where they stop having the desire to look at the Chumash and everything is known by heart. Because when it comes to the Chumash, it has to be recited. You have to look at it. When you do your Shtay Mikra Echad Targum, even if you're a genius and you know all of it by heart, you have to look at it. So the point is here, is that when Moshe Rabbeinu got the Torah, we're told that he got it up to Parashat Yitro. But how is it possible? And then the rest of what was written in the 5 books of Moses, was written in different parts during the next 40 years they were in the desert. Every so often, Hashem would tell Moshe Rabbeinu, here, write this in the Torah, and things that happened. As they happened, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it. So this specific issue was something that was confusing for me personally, because wait a minute, if you're telling me that Hashem already wrote the Torah before the world was created, and Moshe Rabbeinu got the Torah, so how come he didn't give him the whole thing? So the obvious answer is that he didn't want to tell him the future. But at the same token, you want to know if something is missing from that equation. So what's really there? If Hashem already wrote it, even though he didn't give it to Moshe Rabbeinu, that means that it was already written what Korach is going to do and what the Bilam is going to do and so on. So in essence, Hashem made the choice for everybody? No. So what was really there? What did Hashem write with black fire on white fire? He wrote all of the letters in the 5 books of Moses, 304,805 letters. All of them were written as if it was one word. As if it was one word. So for example, in the beginning of every Chumash, you have Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. That's what every Chumash says, right? Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. But instead of it saying, when he first wrote it in the beginning, instead of it saying Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, it was just all 5 words or 7 words were a single word. In fact, the entire Torah was a single word. And as Hashem created the world, he separated the letters at different places in order to make the words. So in essence, even though the entire Torah was already written well before 974 generations before the world was even created, and he gave all of it to Moshe Rabbeinu. He gave the whole thing to Moshe Rabbeinu. What did Moshe Rabbeinu really do over those next 40 years? Did he write everything from scratch? The halacha is you have to copy it from something. So what did he do? In essence, he looked at the original word. Everything was a single word. Hashem told him where to separate the words, where to separate the letters in order to make the words. So let's say you have the letters T-O-P, B-O-T-T-O-M. Okay? Now, if you just read it as a single word, it doesn't make there's nothing. But for most people, you already know that this is really 2 words. If you stop after the P and you move it and you make a space between the P and the next letter B, and you in essence make it into 2 words, you now have top, bottom. So in essence, that's what happened. In the beginning, the whole thing was a single word, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu where to separate this long word into smaller words, without changing the letters, without changing the place of the letters. Just simply, count 3 letters, make a space. Count 5 letters, make a space. Count 2 letters, make a space. Count 7 letters, make a space. And so on and so forth. And that's how the Torah was written. So in essence, we did receive the entire Torah at Mount Sinai, but as far as making it what it is, that's comprehensible to us, the events themselves had to take place in order for Hashem to dictate where the space would take place, which shows obviously the divinity of the Torah, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have written anything in there, but he decided those specific words. Now, of course, this is also why you have many, many other secrets that are written in the Torah that are found through the words, in between the words, with all types of systems that are used by the sages to find different intricate secrets within the Torah, and to show that it's far, 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 and as far as possible from being simply a storybook. There's a lot of different intricate details that are there, including, most importantly, all of the laws that we have that are from the oral Torah, you will find in the written Torah, if you know how to look. And the sages, when they're writing that this or that is the halacha, is the law, they always have to bring what's called a source from the Torah. A source from the Torah. Now, the sources for the halachot have to come either from the actual scripture itself. There has to be a verse that specifically says that law, that this is, there's no other way to understand it. This is the law, this is the source, and that source can't be used for multiple laws. Use that verse for a law, that's it. That verse can't be used for 17 laws, that from now on you're going to use this verse for everything. Once it was decided by the sages that this verse is going to be for such and such law, that's it. That's the source. Now, if you have a different law that's similar, you have to find a different verse in the Torah that says it. A different verse of the Torah, showing how massive the Torah is. How massive the Torah is. Now, this is the main way of how the sages extrapolated from the written Torah in order to tell us where the sources are for the laws of the oral Torah. Because the oral Torah is, in essence, part of the same thing. Oral Torah and written Torah is the same thing. It's in essence, they go together. It can't be oral or written, one without the other. They both feed off of each other. Unlike what the Christians think, that only the written Torah is what's divine. That's the confusion of the heretics and the Christians and idolaters. And the reason why they do that is because they know that the oral Torah is the one that completely dishevels their entire belief, because part of the oral Torah highlights the idolatrous practices of their Messiah, of their false god, of their idols, and so on. But there's also other reasons too, that it completely destroys their entire belief system altogether. So that's why the number one enemy of Christianity is the oral Torah. But Jews that are aware and of what the Torah is know that the oral Torah and the written Torah are something that is glued to each other. They cannot live separate from each other. They must be together. Now, the main source of all the halachot comes from this written Torah, and that's where the sages extrapolated from. The other source is Moshe Sinai. Moshe Sinai meaning that there's tradition that this specific law, Moshe Rabbeinu himself taught it as part of the oral Torah. And there are certain times where it's specific that everyone knows. This is the tradition. Moshe Rabbeinu said this is the halacha, even though there isn't a specific verse that is stating exactly this, but we know this is from Moshe Rabbeinu. And there are some laws that are like that. Now, what if somebody brings, like the Christians like to bring, many times they like to bring their proofs from the Nevi'im V'Ktuvim, from the prophets and the writings. Can you bring an halacha from the prophets and the writings? Answer is no. You do not learn halacha from the prophets and the writings. Anytime you read Gemara, you are going to realize that little by little, by learning Gemara, learning the Talmud, you're little by little going to learn not only the entire oral Torah, but the entire written Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses, and also the entire Tanakh, and many other things. Everything is in that Talmud. Everything is in the Gemara. So sometimes when the sages are debating their sources of which one is this and which one is that, they're going to use a source from the Nevi'im and Ktuvim, from the prophets and the writings. But this is not something that would determine what an halacha is. This is what's called an asmachta. An asmachta is a supporting verse. It's not something that you can determine an halacha from, but rather it's supportive to what your case is. But if you want this to be the halacha, you have to give me a verse. Because surely the entire Tanakh is connected to each other. So the oral Torah, the written Torah, and obviously the prophets and the writings, they're all connected. They're one of the same spiritual nervous system. So surely you're going to have certain things that are mentioned in the 5 books of Moses that are repeated in one form or another in the rest of the Tanakh. So it's not a surprise. So when if you found an asmachta, you found a verse in the prophets, in Proverbs, in Psalms, or anything like that in the writings, then surely there is a source for that in the 5 books of Moses. It's in the 5 books of Moses also. But I can't use just your verse from Psalms or Proverbs or Lamentations or wherever it is to determine an halacha. That's an asmachta. Now, sure, there's a lot of lessons to learn from there. There's a lot of different secrets that are there. The secrets of Mashiach and the end of days, the war, and so on and so forth. A lot of it is you'll find throughout the entire Tanakh, not just the 5 books of Moses, throughout the entire Tanakh. But when it comes to the actual law itself, we have to have a source from the 5 books of Moses or Moshe Sinai. Now, here you have Moshe Rabbeinu watch somebody take the Torah that he got at Mount Sinai. He learned the entire Torah with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He learned much more than what he gave us. What he gave us is the essence of the Torah. He got the whole Torah, but he gave us the essence of the Torah because regular human beings cannot handle the real Torah in this world. He saw the entire Torah, but he gave us the essence of the Torah. The real Torah will be able to learn BeEzrat HaShem in heaven, in Olam Haba. But when he went to the class of the future of Rabbi Akiva, he was confused at first. And Moshe Rabbeinu says to Hashem, why are you giving me the Torah if 1,000 years or so, a little over 1,000 years later, you're going to have somebody like Rabbi Akiva? Why don't you give him the Torah? It's worth it, according to Moshe Rabbeinu, it was worth it to delay giving the Torah by over 1,000 years just to give it to this Rabbi Akiva, because that's how great he was. So the Gemara says, Hashem's response to him was that there is going to be a man who is going to live in a future generation, and his name will be Akiva ben Yosef. And he is destined to extrapolate from every minute detail of the Torah multitudes and multitudes of halachot, as is brought in Gemara Masechet Menachot 29b, as I said. So the greatness of Rabbi Akiva was no less than Shimon ben Azai. That's why the Chachamim, anytime they are trying to tell the others that they are experiencing a moment of enlightenment where you could ask him anything, they're specifying these 2 people. Why? Because these 2 were the experts. But here we discovered that Ben Azai was an expert in halacha. What about Rabbi Akiva? Says the Chazon Ish, we find that our sages regarded Rabbi Akiva's greatness specifically as being his knowledge of the obscure laws of negaim and o'alot, which is matters of ritual impurity. As it says in the Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin, page 67b, where the sages say to Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Akiva's rabbi, says to Rabbi Akiva, says, what are you doing in the realm of Agadah? Stay with Negaim and O'alot. And Rashi explains that Negaim and O'alot are mentioned because of the difficulty in understanding them. And those are the things that you are sharp with when it comes, not Agadah. So here we have to explain what actually transpired here. The Chachamim were debating the details of what happened in the plagues of Egypt. And Rabbi Akiva said, when it comes to the plague of the frogs, it says, initially it says frog, in the verses in the book of Exodus, it says there was a frog, and then it says frogs. So we see that one, it says it singular, and then it says a plural. So Rabbi Akiva says from here we learn that originally there was one giant frog, and every time the Egyptians hit this giant frog, many, many frogs came out of this giant frog. It wouldn't die, more frogs would come out of it until it completely encompassed all of Egypt. So comes his rabbi, Rabbi Elazar, he says to him, Rabbi Akiva, with all due respect, Haggadah is not your expertise. You're not the best at Haggadah. I don't agree with you. You are very good in halacha, all types of things. You're amazing. Comes to Haggadah, no, you're not, because what you're saying is not right. It wasn't that one frog breeded, millions and millions of frogs. But rather, what Torah is teaching us, according to Rabbi Elazar, is that one frog called all of its friends, all of the other frogs, to come to Egypt. Interestingly enough, that today the most well-known story of the details of the Makot, as regards to the frogs, is actually Rabbi Akiva's midrash. That it was one big frog, and every time you hit it, millions and millions of frogs would come out of it. Not Rabbi Elazar, his rabbi. Even though Rabbi Akiva wasn't as respected for his knowledge of midrashim and agadot as his rabbi and other people were. But here we see that when Rabbi Akiva is praised, he's praised as the expert of halacha. Hence the reason why the Chachamim say, every time you want to know, that I'm experiencing a moment of enlightenment, I'm not experiencing a moment of enlightenment by telling you stories. No, I'm telling you right now I feel the siyata dishmaya because I have clarity to know the law. And the law, the halacha itself, that is what makes a person great in the world of the Torah. That's what makes a person great in the world of Torah. And that's also why it is so really upsetting at times when you see people that literally don't even know how to read a responsa. Don't even know how to read a responsa. If I gave them Rav Ephraim's responsa, Achtov L'Yisrael, any one of the volumes, they wouldn't survive a single page. They wouldn't survive a single page. They wouldn't even understand what is actually being said there because the language is so high and it's not at their level. But yet they think that they are at a level to not only call someone like Rav Ephraim someone that's not knowledgeable, but even say that the poskim of the generation don't know anything, and the Gdolei Hador don't know anything, and the Rambam doesn't know anything. Only they know something. Them, from their hole in the wall somewhere in the world, they know better than the Arizal, they know better than the Rambam, they know better than the Rabbi Akiva, they know better than everybody else. They don't literally even understand the basic concept of the Jewish religion or the Jewish language, Hebrew, the Sfat HaKodesh, and what's the difference between Sfat HaKodesh and traditional Hebrew, that's modern Hebrew today. They don't understand anything, but yet they have the audacity to even think they're allowed to disagree with any one of the Chachamim. This, unfortunately, Rabotai, is one of the prophecies that's mentioned in the Gemara Masechet Sotah, page 49b. Says that in a generation before Mashiach, chutzpah tizgeh, is going to be obnoxious people that have such nerve that it's going to be really something beyond comprehension. How people literally do not even know what a scalpel is, what a knife is, but yet they're going to tell the surgeon how to perform a surgery. Literally, in the Torah world, you have people that do not even know basic things. Basic things. But yet they feel they could publicly disagree with Dayanim, with Chachamim, with people that have not only delved into the world of the Torah much more than them, but people that are well respected as the Gdolim of the generation, this one and the one before. And yet they feel like it's okay to just disagree with them as if they're ordinary men. Now, really to truly appreciate what Chachamim are, a person has to learn halacha. Why? Because although learning MUSSAR and learning midrashim is extremely entertaining, stimulating, helpful, it's great. It's my personal favorite. It's Am Yisrael's personal favorite. Even the Gemara says it's something that the Jewish neshama connects to. But the point is that the halacha is much more difficult, much more difficult, and both to learn and to teach. But in order to define who is great, who can be a Gadol Hador, who can be someone that's a Talmid Chacham, it's all based on their knowledge of halacha, not their knowledge of MUSSAR and otherwise. Now, of course, they have to be an ethical person and so on, but the point being is that the greatness of a Jew is determined based on their knowledge of halacha. That's the main determining factor. Now, the Rav Ovadia, alav Shalom, when before he became world-renowned Rav Ovadia, when he was still an avrech, he gave many shiurim, and he had a group of Baalei Batim, people that are workers, working all types of field during the day, and come to a shiur at night. One guy's a plumber, one guy works with cement, another guy works with different animals, and regular average blue collar people. And after it's finished, they come to a shiur. Now, him with his vast knowledge of halacha and the countless sfarim that he wrote and the psaks that he issued and how much Torah he delved in, only HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows. What did he teach them? In the beginning, he taught them stories. Taught them midrashim. He taught them midrashim sometimes with some MUSSAR in them, for many times more than half of the shiur, more than half of the lecture would be just different stories, amazing stories of what happened with Moshe Rabbeinu and some of the tzaddikim and different things that happened to Am Yisrael throughout all of the ages. And he had way with words and how an ability to narrate a story that literally all of these average people that just finished working with cement and working with the fields and animals and so on and so forth, they would come to this shiur and they would drink this up. And they'd fall in love with it. And then in the later part of the shiur, he'd start giving them a few halachot. And as they continued advancing, he started increasing more and more halachot. And eventually, he said to all of these Baalei Batim, we're not talking about avrechim, scholars that are coming to kol all day. We are talking about, business people, blue-collar workers, regular traditional people that have a day job, but that are coming to learn Torah. They're coming to a shiur. And they're coming after he saw that they're serious and they're coming for an extended period of time, he would increase more and more halachot. And then he would tell them, okay, now we're going to start learning from the books, from the source itself. And then I'm going to start testing you once a week. Once a week I'm going to test you. Well, I should test, and this is what he did. Now, how come he didn't start with the halachot right away? Because first of all, most people, if they're not in love with the Torah, especially if they're working and so on, they don't like to learn halachot. They find it boring, they find it sometimes too difficult, too burdensome. Most people think if they keep Shabbat and they don't drive on Shabbat and they eat kosher, they already view themselves as religious. Even though they may not even know half of the laws of Shabbat, they think that as long as they don't drive on Shabbat, they're already religious. It's unfortunately very, very far away from the truth. So, to teach them halachot right away, you're going to lose the crowd. The other hand is that, again, most people think that they already know enough. So, he wanted to get them to love the Torah first. Love the Torah first in a way that they find attractive, they find interesting. So he would give them all of these different stories, these different lessons, some lessons within a lesson, some MUSSAR in it, and then a little more and more halachot, and eventually literally started testing them once a week. And his sons say that on Shabbat it was full of tension. Why? Because the Rav Ovadia would be studying for the test. He would be studying to issue them a test the next day. Now, all of these Baalei Batim, all of these regular blue-collar people, what happened with them? What happened with all of them? They stayed blue-collar people. They stayed. Many of them stayed farmers and truck drivers and cement workers and so on, but they knew Torah. But not only that, they loved the Torah. And because of that, literally, all of their kids of all of these people ended up becoming Talmidei Chachamim. Every single one of them had kids, and all of them already were breathing the love of the Torah that their father got from the shiur of Rav Ovadia, and they all lived a life of Torah and became Talmidei Chachamim. Pursued the Torah even further than their parents did. So here we see that the fruits, sometimes they take generations to come, that the fruits, but nonetheless, don't think that the tree itself is something to ignore. Even the tree gets better. Even the parents got better. And that's one of the difficulties that you have today, where you have schools, different rabbis, building a yeshiva. And unfortunately, sometimes they don't see much success with certain kids. Part of the reason is because although the teaching in the school could be great, unfortunately, the main student doesn't show up to class. Who's the main student? The parent. The parent doesn't show up to class. If the parent sends the kid to a yeshiva and pays the money or gets a discount or whatever the case may be, and the kid goes to yeshiva and he learns the halacha and he learns the midrash and he learns the this and he learns the that, and the rabbi likes the kid and he treats him good and everything is good. But when the kid goes home, he sees his parents are not exactly in tune with the Torah. He sees that his parents, sometimes they make fun of the Torah. Sometimes they care less about it. Sometimes they say, listen, you're Jewish, so you go to yeshiva, but don't worry, you don't have to be there forever. Eventually you're going to be a businessman like your father. The kid sees that the Torah is not very valuable in his house. What ends up happening? All of the teaching that he's learning in yeshiva, most of it goes into the garbage. Why? Because the parents are destroying it. And this is one of the pitfalls of Jewish education today, where the parents sometimes are willing to commit financially to send the kid to a yeshiva, but they're not willing to commit spiritually to do tshuva themselves, to commit to the Torah life themselves. Because if the kid goes to the best yeshiva in the world, but the parents are still disrespecting the Torah, are still ignoring the Torah, are still living like as if they're secular or as if they're modernized, the yeshiva education is not going to bring anywhere near as many fruits as it should, and in many cases, it'll be a complete failure. But it's not the fault of the yeshiva, it's the fault of the parents. And this is one of the things that a person needs to know, is that to teach your kid halacha is not enough. You yourself have to learn it. You yourself have to live it. And this is why when Rabbi Ovadia was learning, he was not only learning for the sake of making the Talmidei Chachamim of the future, but he was teaching the parents. And he himself merited to have something that almost nobody else had, which is literally every one of his children is a extraordinary Talmid Chacham. Every one of his kids became a huge Rav, a Rosh Kolel, a Rishon LeZion, an extraordinary Chacham. In fact, one of our dear friends, Arav Asaf ben Moshe, who's Arav Gidon ben Moshe's brother, he told a story to Rav Ephraim that when his father passed away, and having the levaya, one of the people that came to the levaya and to sit shiva with them was Rav Ovadia's son, Rav Ovadia's late son, Rav Yaakov Yosef, Alav Shalom. Rav Yaakov Yosef was something like a genius is an understatement. A genius is an understatement. Rav Ovadia himself said about his own son, Rav Yaakov Yosef, that when he was 20 years old, he didn't know as much as his son when he was 20 years old. He says the amount of knowledge that he had was something out of this world. They asked him one time, how many times have you completed the Shulchan Aruch? How many times have you completed Shulchan Aruch? And his answer was, when I got to 101 times, I stopped counting. I got to 101 times, I stopped counting. And he was an Ish Kodesh, Ish Emet, Alacha is Alacha. And the amount of knowledge that he had and clarity of the Torah that he had was literally like it was in front of him. Everything was in front of him, as clear as day. So when Rav Gidon ben Moshe and Rav Asaf ben Moshe were sitting shiva for their father, Rav Yaakov Yosef comes. And different Chachamim are saying different things. And the problem is that you're not allowed to learn traditional Torah. You either learn divrei MUSSAR at the levaya, because the kids, since their father passed away, they're not allowed to learn regular Torah. You can't tell them about the holidays or the parashat shavua, because they're sitting shiva. So the halacha is you're not allowed to learn those things. You only learn divrei MUSSAR, words of MUSSAR, or laws that are specific to mourning. So Rav Yosef says, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef says, listen, I'm not giving a shiur about divrei Torah, about MUSSAR. It's hard for me. Let's learn some halachot. Let's learn some halachot of avilut, of mourning. Okay. Now, this is a group of chachamim. And they see this and they say this. He said, okay, Shulchan Aruch, Ilchot Avilut. First halacha. Seif ta. This is what it says. Says the exact thing. But also, Chacham over here says this. Chacham over here says that. And he gives him the entire law with the different opinions. Okay. Number 2. Next halacha. Here's what it says. Chacham over here says this. Chacham over here says this. Word for word. And he goes through the entire section of the Shulchan Aruch, laws of Avelut, laws of mourning, by heart. No book. No book. Until they told him, okay, stop. Before you finish the entire Shulchan Aruch, this is the end of Lichot Avelut. Literally, the entire section. Not just the Shulchan Aruch, but all the different opinions. Completely by heart, word for word, as if he's reading it from a book. With sharp clarity and everything you could possibly imagine that you would want for yourself, literally, right there and then. His understanding of Torah was something that is mamash unprecedented. His own father said this is a person that he says knew more than him at the age of 20 years old. When he got the disease, he got cancer, and the doctor told him, "You have a month to live. You have a month to live." Now, the fools among us, what do when they hear they have a month to live? May none of us ever hear such news, but nonetheless, what does a fool think? Oh, let's go take a vacation, hang out with the family, relax, before I die. That's the mind of a fool. What does someone that's glued to Hashem and His Torah do? Rabbi Yaakov Yosef brings his family together, tells them the news, and says, I want you to arrange for me as many shiurim as possible for anyone that's willing to hear me. I said to him, but Abba, it's dangerous. You have chemotherapy. Shiurim. Yeah, but Abba, it's difficult for you to move and travel. Shiurim. It's all I want. How many? As many as you can possibly fit in a day. Every day. This went on not for a month, not for 2 months, not for 6 months. For a year. He continued giving shiur after shiur after shiur. For over a year, literally over 1,000 shiurim he made in the last year of his life. Over 1,000 shiurim. And the people, many of the people, loved the shiurim so much, they would just go with him from shiur to shiur. Oh, you finish a year, where are you going now? Okay, they just follow him, and they go to the next shiur. So he couldn't continue and say the same shiur in different places. Every shiur had to be different. Okay, we're going to learn Ilchot Brachot. Okay, over there we're going to learn Ilchot of mourning. Over there we're going to learn Ilchot of Yom Tov. Over here we're going to learn this. Every shiur, over 1,000 shiurim in a matter of a year. Something that I think if I was 100% healthy, I wouldn't be able to do. Something out of this world. And that's how he spent the last year of his life. Mamash bought himself another year in his life full of shiurim. So for some fool to come out and say, oh, I disagree with chachamim, people like this, a person that understands the lives, the contributions, the sacrifice of the chachamim finds this so ludicrous. There's no other way to find it than just being offended by it to the highest extent, but realizing that unfortunately these people that make fun of the chachamim are like lost causes. Lost cause because they don't even understand what they're making fun of. They simply don't understand what they're making fun of. Rav Ovadia Alav Shalom, he writes in his Sefer Yechaveh Dat, in chapter 4, halacha number 16, that when, just like the Rambam writes in Ilchot Brachot, chapter 10, halacha number 14, the Shulchan Aruch writes in Orach Chaim, chapter 224, halacha number 6, and they are also quoting Masechet Brachot 58a. All of this is quoting the same thing, which is that when you see someone that is a Talmid Chacham, someone that's an extraordinary Talmid Chacham, not just someone that learns Torah, but someone that's a well-known a Gadol, someone that's a Chacham, you make a blessing. What's the blessing? Baruch shechalak michochmotav le'erav. That may Hashem be blessed for sharing from His wisdom to those that fear Him. Baruch shechalak michochmato le'erav. And when there is actually, as a side note, when you see a very wise man among the nations, let's say a Nikola Tesla, Aristotle, all these other people, there's also a blessing for those wise men among the nations. We recognize their wisdom also, and there's a blessing, but it's not the same blessing. The blessing on them is Baruch Shenatan Michochmato Lebnei Basar. That may be blessed, may Hashem be blessed, that He gave from His wisdom to flesh and blood. So the Pri Megadim, one of the sages, says, how come for Am Yisrael, for the sages among Am Yisrael, it says that blessed is he that he shared his wisdom with those that fear him. So he shared his wisdom, but with the wise among the nations, he gave wisdom. Why? Because with Am Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu became one with them. Am Yisrael, Hashem, and the Torah became one. So in essence, when someone acquires Torah, when someone is learning Torah, when someone toils in Torah to the extent where they literally, this is how they think. They think in verses. They only see the world from a sight of the Torah. Then that person literally becomes one with Hashem. So it's in essence he becomes as if he's a part of Hashem. Of course, Hashem has no parts, but in essence this is to make it understandable to our ear. It's Hashem chalak mi chokhmato. He gave from his share as if he gave a piece of himself to this chacham. But for the wise among the nations, he gave them wisdom. He just gave them. He didn't share anything from himself. He gave them like you give somebody a candy. It's valuable, but it's obviously not the same. Not the same as giving somebody an arm. Not the same. Now, although the Chachamim in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Gemara, in the Rambam, all psak that when you see one of these Chachamim, you make a blessing. The Rama and also some of the other Chachamim, one of the Chachamim from Turkey, one of the Gedolim from Turkey, the Petach HaGvir, say that we no longer have such Chachamim, like the ones that the Gemara is talking about making a blessing for them. We no longer have such Chachamim. And also, even the Rambam himself, even though he psaks that you have to make a blessing when you see Chachamim, he says that really the word Gaon, the word genius, the numerical value of it is 60. Why? Why is this significant? Because the word Gaon was only given to somebody like Rav Sadia Gaon and others that were called Gaonim from that generation of Gaonim, of people that knew the entire Shas by heart. The entire, not just the Talmud Bavli, the Talmud Yerushalmi, with all of the different commentaries and intricate details, and also all the different Mishnayot that were not discussed in the Talmud. They were Geonim, those people that knew everything. Literally by heart, without any, you ask them anything and everything, they knew it as if they're reading it. And he says, we don't have anybody, he writes himself, we don't have anybody that knows the entire Talmud by heart. He's describing it in comparison to the generation of the Geonim that knew the Talmud Bavli, Yerushalmi, all the different details like they did in the generation before him, which was about 150, 200 years before him. And he says, we don't have anybody like that. He says, that's why I wrote the Mishneh Torah, because it's for, simple people like us. He, in his humility, thought that he's like everybody else. The genius of all geniuses, the Rambam, Moshe ad Moshe lo haya Moshe. From Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, until Moses, which is the Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, there was nobody like Moshe. But he was so humble, he says, I wrote the Mishneh Torah because most people don't know the entire Talmud by heart, and they don't know where to find all of the laws within the Talmud. So I wrote the Mishneh Torah so it's easy for you to find all of the laws. All of the laws you can find. You need the laws of Shemitah, here you go. You want laws of Avelut, here you go. You want laws of Kashrut, here you go. Laws of Shchita, here you go. Shabbat, here you go. You have everything. I already extrapolated from the Talmud, and it's for simple people like us, because nobody knows the Talmud by heart anymore, like the previous generations. And this is his humility, but nonetheless, this is how it used to be. Today, we only wish to know not just the Rambam, just even the Shulchan Aruch, which is smaller than the Rambam. He didn't cover the Shulchan Aruch didn't cover as much as the Rambam did. But we paskin like the Shulchan Aruch, and all places the Shulchan Aruch paskin, but anytime he doesn't, we go by the Rambam. That's generally how it works. But either way, the Halakha in the Rambam is already discussing that you have to say this blessing when you see a Chacham. But there are some Chachamim, like the Rama, like I said, the Petach Gvir, that say, no, we don't have such Chachamim, and therefore there's no one to make such a blessing on, even if that's a Gdolador. But comes Rav Ovadia in his Yechavedat, and he brings sources, and he says, no, with all due respect to the Chachamim that said that we don't do the blessing on the Chachamim, I disagree. We have enough Chachamim that say you do the blessing. We have the Rambam, we have the Gemara, we have other places, and therefore we do the blessing. We give the blessing if you see a Chacham. Now, how do you know who is considered a Chacham that you do a blessing on? First, he gives the description, what they have to do. They have to be someone that is not only learning halacha, but is an expert in halacha. An expert in halacha, and is also someone that's a dayan. He's a posek, he's a dayan. He's someone that is not just learning for himself, but is someone that is well-renowned as to be someone that's exercising this knowledge in dayanut, also is giving shiurim, and has yirat shamayim. Which means, if he's a dayan, if he gives shiurim, if he's an expert in the laws, he knows all of it by heart, but he is like one of these people that has no fear of HaShem, then you don't do a blessing on him. One ingredient is missing, there's no blessing. But if he has all of those, Rav Ovadia paskins, same thing as the Rambam, same thing as Shulchan Aruch, same thing as the Gemara, you have to make a blessing when you see him. You have to make a blessing. So here we see that when a person becomes such an expert in halacha, they get to a point where you have to literally make a blessing when you see them. You have to make a blessing when you see them. If their book falls on the floor, you pick it up and you have to kiss it. But the rest of these Joes that like to make fun of the Torah, the rest of these Joes that don't even understand the Torah, not only you don't make a blessing on them, their book falls on the floor, you don't even have to pick it up. You don't even have to pick it up. What did they read? They wrote a comic book. They wrote Harry Potter. Harry Potter falls on the floor. You care? Harry Potter falls on the floor. You have to kiss anything? No. That's also one of the biggest differences between the Torah world and the secular world. As great as people think they are in the secular world, where they achieved major milestones of acquiring wealth that's not even theirs, and acquiring buildings that is only temporary, and all types of influences that are an imaginary illusion, in reality, if they leave the world tomorrow, it's as if they were never here. It's as if they're nowhere here. If they wrote a book, that book, you could throw it in the garbage. You could read it in a bathroom. But if a Chacham writes a book, that book ever hits the floor, you have to pick it up in kisses. That book you can't read in the bathroom. That book is something you have to respect, no different than how you respect the Sefer Torah. So when a person understands that you have to respect the work of the Chacham, to that extent, needless to say, you have to respect the Chacham. So when you have fools making fun of the Chachamim or publicly disagreeing with them, it's such ignorance to such a high level, you're not even sure if these people are even aware of what they're doing. And unfortunately, this is not a new thing. This has happened throughout the generations, and it happened to Rav Ovadia. It happened even to Moshe Rabbeinu. This is not a new thing. There was one time Rav Ovadia, he saw that there is issues among certain people where if, let's say, the wife breaks her hand or her leg and she has a cast on, then and she doesn't go to the mikveh. Now, this can create some major shlom bayit problems, or this can create major sins where the husband goes with her anyway because he doesn't care whether she has a cast on, and he doesn't care if she went into the mikveh or not. He has needs. So Rav Ovadia reviewed this and paskin halacha that the cast is not considered chatzitza. It's not considered separating, and she's allowed to go to the mikveh with the cast on, lest she doesn't go to the mikveh and you end up doing her and her husband a sin of karet. Now, when he came out with this halacha, immediately some of the people over there, mainly Ashkenazim, went against him, started writing notes, started writing all types of things against him. And surely they did not review the halacha anywhere nearly as much as he did. But they publicized things against him as if he is a heretic that believes in a foreign god. And this was not the only time. This was not even close to the only time. There was another time where he saw that sometimes a woman forgets to do the bdika on time. And after toiling over the Torah, he says that if she forgot, she has 13 and a half minutes after the sundown. When he came out with this extra 13 and a half minutes, which was an extraordinary chidush, this is not like lechatchila. This is not like what you're supposed to wait 13 minutes. But if she forgot during the day, she could wait up to 13 and a half minutes. When he came out with this, they got a bunch of rabbis to sign a letter to take all of his books and throw them in the garbage. Take Rav Ovadia's books, throw them in the garbage. To not publish anything. Rav Ovadia saw what they were doing. Before they published all the books, he said, no, I want to add another page. Add another page to the book. What's another page? Last page. Last page I want to write. He writes, and I am not retracting my opinion because I wish all of the halachas that I ever spoke about and wrote about were as clear to me as this being 100% emet. And he writes this in his book. And he publishes this. And these different people decide to go against him. And they try to bring a letter to Rav Tzion Abba Shaul. Rav Tzion Abba Shaul, even though he was a very, very dear friend of Rav Ovadia, there were many times that they paskin differently. They had a machloka between them, but nonetheless, they were still best friends, still loved each other, still neighbors, still chavuta, but they don't always agree on everything. When they brought this letter to Rav Tzion Abba Shaul to sign, they brought him to sign against Rav Ovadia. Rav Tzion Abba Shaul looks at all of these so-called respectable people that signed and the people that brought them, and he looks at them and he says, if you want to live, you want to stay alive past this year, you don't ever publicize this letter. And you tell all of these rabbis that signed against Rav Ovadia that they're taking a life risk. Of course, this surprised everybody because they know that Rav Tzion Abashul doesn't always agree with Rav Ovadia. So what's the problem? This is a disagreement. You have to write, he's wrong over here. He said, if you ever understood how much Rav Ovadia toils before he paskins an halacha, you would never dare question him on a single thing. And not only you're questioning him, but you're saying to destroy his books, to go against him, that he's wrong. Your life is at risk. Just like the Gemara promises. Person that goes against Talmid Chacham, mocks a Talmid Chacham, simply his life is in danger. Simply put, he's only going to bring himself tragedy. It's a promise from the Torah. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is much more zealous over the protection of his Chachamim than even for his own honor. And Rav Tzion Abba Shaul says, when I saw, even after Rav Ovadia became the great that he became, I took a flight with him one time. Now, of course, everybody learns, everybody studies, everybody teaches, all these. Rav Tzion Abba Shaul is not an average person. He's a Kodesh Kodeshim. He's one of the other Gedolei Ador. He says, one time, I was on a flight. It was a 16, 17-hour flight with Rav Ovadia next to me. Watching him study, watching him learn Torah throughout the entire flight, said, made me weak. It's something I didn't think it's humanly possible to be that dedicated. And we're talking about one of the most dedicated people in the world saying this about Rav Ovadia. And you think you could just go against them, disagree with them, discount his opinion, and even mock it? This is why, Rabotai, it's very, very important for a person to know that when someone becomes a Gadol Ador, it's not because they're a good speaker. It's not because they wrote good books. It's a decision from Shamayim. It's a decision from HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. This is who I want to represent me. This is who I chose to be my representative. Because there are many Chachamim throughout all of the generation. There's no nation in the world that ever had as many wise people as the Jewish people, despite our size being much smaller than all of the other nations. Still, there has never been a nation with as many wise people as the Jewish people. Simply put. This is a fact, not a theory. You could look at it in every aspect. There's simply no nation that has as many wise people as the Jewish people. And despite all of that, not all of them became the leaders of the generation, the Gedolei Ador, the Moses of their generation. Hashem specifically decided who is going to be the Gadol and when they're going to be the Gadol. When he decided that this person, that this tzaddik, that this Gadol is going to be a Gadol, that's what it was. It was a decision from Shamayim. It was a decision from Shamayim, no different than how it's going to be a decision one day from Shamayim of who's going to be the Mashiach. Hashem decided. There are many Chachamim, but not all of them got to the same greatness. But the ones that got to greatness, it wasn't because they were good writers, and it wasn't because they were very studious. Although they were both, but it wasn't because of that. It's simply HaKadosh Baruch Hu deciding, this is my representative. This is the Moses of his generation. And Baruch Hashem, when a person understands the value of the Chachamim, he does exactly as Rav Yitzchak Yosef wrote to us in a letter. He doesn't move right or left or anywhere out of their hands. He stays in their hands, holding their hands like a little baby. Where you want me to go? Right? Okay, I'm going right. How about this? Don't tell me where. I'm just going to go. Wherever you're going, I'm going. Why? You're Gadol. That's how we know where to go. That's how we know where to go in Judaism. We don't know where to go based on, who I like. We don't know where to go based on who's most popular. That's not how we know where to go in Judaism. Rabbi Akiva teaches Am Yisrael is like a dove. And the Chachamim, the Gedolei Ador, are like the wings. where when Am Yisrael uses its wings, it flies, and when it doesn't, it crashes and dies. That's what one of the greatest Gdolim that ever lived says about Am Yisrael, Rabbi Akiva. When a person understands that this Gdula, this significance is established by the comprehension of halacha, by the delivery of halacha, by the understanding of it, by knowing exactly where and why to paskin, when to be lenient, when to be stringent. Look for ways to be lenient, but still halachically 100% kosher. Don't look to be stringent. Fools can be stringent. Fools can be stringent. And that's also one of the things that you see among many people that are new. Baalei Tshuva, new converts, or simply people that are ignorant. They want to be stringent everywhere and terrorize everyone that is their victim along the way, thinking that that's what makes them religious. Being stringent does not make you religious. Being stringent makes you a fool in the eyes of the Torah if you're stringent in the wrong places. Because the Gemara in Yerushalmi says, just like it is forbidden, it's forbidden to make the prohibited permitted, it's also forbidden to make the permitted forbidden. And a person that decides, no, I'm going to be stringent here, and there's no real reason of why they're stringent, they just want to be stringent. If you're just doing it yourself, you want to bring a stringency in yourself, that's one thing. But if you want to say everybody else is a sinner because your stringency, that's a mistake and a half. One time a person came to Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, alav shalom, and he says to him, Rabbi, I want to ask you, about my Shabbat. I started taking on the stringency to observe Shabbat for an extra hour. What does the rabbi think of that? Am I growing? So Rav Mordechai Eliyahu says to him, well, let me ask you something. When you, now that you are keeping Shabbat for an extra hour and you're going to the synagogue an hour early, and pretty much by the time you finish praying for Shabbat, you see people still driving to shul, because for them, Shabbat hasn't started yet, because they're starting at the normal time, an hour after you. Do you view them as sinners? Tell me the truth. And the guy says, you know what, Rabbi? You're right, I do, right? Maybe they should. Mordechai Eliyahu says to him, I forbid you from keeping Shabbat an extra hour. Go back and be like everybody else. If your stringency that you brought on yourself is something that makes you think that everybody else is wicked, then your stringency is not a good stringency. It's an unhealthy stringency. Don't do it. Don't do it. But if your stringency on yourself, you still realize that everybody's perfectly fine, you just have a stringency, that's a different story. That's a different story. And that's unfortunately one of the things that people don't understand. They want to sometimes be stringent because they think that's what makes them closer to HaShem. Unfortunately, today there's so much confusion when it comes to Torah that people think that the standard stuff that we teach is stringencies. When in reality, everything that we teach is the basic minimum. Everything that we teach is basic minimum. The fact that a lot of people don't know it is a sad reality, but nonetheless doesn't change that it's the basic minimum. I generally don't teach stringencies. Why? Because we don't even know all the basics yet. Needless to say, stringencies. Stringencies are unnecessary. Let us just be experts in the basics. And that's one of the things that the Gdolim, the sages and the generations, are experts in. To know exactly when to make the leniencies lenient and the stringencies strict. Rav Kozinski, alav shalom, had a ability to find the permissible leniencies in many places and issue halachot that would sometimes drive other chachamim crazy. How did you find this leniency? Where did you do this? And sometimes people that were not anywhere near as experts in it as he was would sometimes go against him. But he was so committed to Am Yisrael there was one time when he got a letter that his daughter was on her deathbed. He immediately took out of all the letters that everybody wrote him that to tell them what to do, what's the halacha and so on. He took the 70 most critical letters and right away, over a matter of a couple of hours, wrote answers as fast as possible to tell them exactly what to do, answering these 70 letters. As soon as he completed the 70th letter, he was notified that his daughter died, and obviously he wasn't able to continue doing his work because he had to sit shiva for his daughter. But that's how much he cared about making sure that people knew and were clear about what to do when it comes to Torah. When somebody came to him and says, but how do you issue these leniencies? How do you issue this leniency with this such and such cow in this city, or this such and such this? And he says to them, you know why you ask? You know why you question why I'm lenient there? Because you're not a posek. You're not a posek, and you don't have the burden of the people on your head. You're thinking from your own perspective, you on your own little family, from your perspective, and you're thinking, we can do it, we should just be stringent over there. You're not thinking of this entire city is full of poor people, and if I don't find a leniency for that specific cow or that specific thing, these poor people are not going to have anything to eat. These poor people are going to end up sinning. These poor people are going to end up abandoning everything. So if I can find a permissible place to find a leniency in order to make the Torah livable for them, of course, that's my job. That's the job of a chacham. A fool can make everything stringent, but only a chacham can find the places to be truly lenient and still be halachically correct. And that's one of the things that people sometimes don't understand. It's not about being strict. It's about sticking to the emet, sticking to the truth. When you stick to the truth, there is no point of debating. That's why these fools that request for us to debate, there's no point of debating. Why? This is the opinion of the Gdolei Ador. Who am I to debate it? This is it. There's nothing else. No argument in the world will make them wrong. What's the point of debating it? This is what they said. This is the psak halacha. You only debate if you're not sure if you're right. But when you have the biggest sages of the generation say something, who are you to disagree? Who are you to even debate it? But that's unfortunately arrogance from people who think that they're greater than the sages, greater than the chachamim, greater than the scholars, and literally not even know right or left of what it's required to even be a chacham. Now, many times, these chachamim will find different ways to bring salvation to the people, whether it's through their psak halacha, or their shiurim, or different things. We'll finish off with a story that you can find in the Sefer. It's actually a series of Sfarim that were written about Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, the Rishon LeZion in the previous generation, one of the Gdolei Ador, who was not only a huge chacham, but was beloved by the people like the Aaron HaKohen of the generation. And in this Sefer called Aviem Shel Israel, the father of Israel, in volume number 6, page 264. All types of real stories, real life stories that happen with the Chacham. In this particular story is not something that happened 1,000 years ago. This story was told about 5 years ago by someone that's not only alive, but someone that's famous that you can find him tomorrow if you want. A very famous paitan by the name of Yechiel Nahari. Very famous chazan, extraordinary voice. And he says the story. Yechiel Nahari came to this Bet Knesset, Abu Av, about 5 years ago. And he told this story. And they wrote it in a book. And he says, years ago, he was working in New York. And after many years of praying and trying, his wife finally became pregnant. So when they went to the doctor to get her checks, to get everything tested and so on, suddenly 3 experts show up into the room and tell Yechiel Nahari and his dear wife, "We're sorry to tell you, but you're going to have to abort this baby. The baby is deformed, and it will be a vicious thing to bring such a thing to life. But don't worry, it's only a 20-minute procedure, and you guys can forget all about it and move on with your lives and bring a healthy baby to the world." Now, Yechiel Nahari says, "Well, we're Jews. We don't have abortions." But the doctors started pressuring him and saying, no, you have to abort this baby. It will be a vicious thing to bring such a baby to the world. You cannot bring such a thing to the world. And they're pressuring him. And he says to them, "Well, listen, us Jews, we don't do anything without talking to our rabbis. So we have to talk to our rabbi." So the 3 doctors says, "Listen, we're not Jews. We don't know anything about this stuff that you're talking about. Go ahead and talk to the rabbi and just come back here tomorrow. We'll perform whatever the procedure." So Yechiel and his wife are distraught, are disheveled. These 3 experts are telling them that they have a deformed baby. They have to perform an abortion after so many years of trying to have a child. Just puts more salt on the wound. And by the time they leave, it's almost 9 o'clock in New York. And they want to ask the question of what to do, but you can't just ask anybody. You have to ask a gadol. You have to ask somebody that knows the neshama of Israel. He says, "I knew that Rav Mordechai Eliyahu is who I can talk to. But it's 3 o'clock in the morning in Israel. I couldn't wait," he says. "And I knew that the tzaddik, he even answers questions at that time at night." And he calls Eretz Yisrael, and after 2 rings, Rav Mordechai Eliyahu picks up the phone. And Yechiel Nahari starts crying to the Rav, mamash crying on the phone. And he says to him everything that happened. And Rav Mordechai Eliyahu says to him, "It's good you didn't listen to those 3 professors, because that boy that you have is going to be born, and he's going to be healthy, and he's going to be especially smart. And those 3 doctors, they're all going to die in the first year your son is alive because of all of the abortions that they do." Yechiel Nahari, on one hand, he's happy that he just got this news from a Gdol Ador, just decreed his baby's going to be alive. Not exactly so excited about the second. He doesn't want anybody else to die, but that's the decree. That's what he said. Comes back to his wife. He says, Rav Mordechai Eliyahu says, everything's going to be okay. And therefore, everything's going to be okay. They go back to the doctors. They tell them the news. Listen, we're not having any abortions. The doctors almost lose their mind. Every single time they see them, they try to put more and more pressure on them to have an abortion. They don't leave this opinion. They keep doing it. And anyone that has experienced pregnancy in this in recently knows that doctors are more and more quick to the trigger of killing babies these days. It's unbelievable. Like they immediately see something, they want to kill the kid. I know one of our kids, they told us, listen, he has an extra big head. You gotta end this. Shem Yishmor v'Yatzil, who listens to these crazy people. Shtabach Shemo La'ad, perfectly beautiful, healthy baby. These doctors have no care in the world sometimes. No care in the world. But that's the way it is. I know that Rav Ephraim, one of his kids, they literally told him to kill the kid until almost 9 months pregnancy. Saying, no, it's not alive. It's not alive. It's not alive. The baby's alive and well. Baruch Hashem, almost 10 years old now. But that's unfortunately sometimes what happens. So you can't necessarily always say, oh, doctor said therefore. You have to also sometimes have a conversation with the Chachamim. In this particular case, Yechiel Nahari, smart enough to go to the Gdol Ador and had Siyata D'Shmaya and access to one of the Gedolei Hador. And he says, the baby's going to be born, he's going to be smart, and those doctors are all going to die in the first year the baby's alive. And Yechiel says, as the Rav said, exactly on time the baby is born. And it's a beautiful baby. It's the cutest little boy. And all we care about, okay, it's alive, Baruch Hashem, nothing's deformed. We just want to make sure the baby's healthy otherwise. And he says, not only is it healthy, but little by little we find out as time passes that this baby is especially smart. 4 months later, after the baby is born, one of the doctors dies in a car accident. Of course, when he finds out, Yechinal finds out, he's shocked, he's nervous, goosebumps. What can you do? 8 months after birth, second doctor dies in a helicopter crash. Goes in a helicopter, sees some views. Kadosh Baruch Hu decides that's the day he's going to take his life back. Obviously, this shocks them even further than the first one. But he says, but the third one, nothing was happening. And we're almost closed on a year. On exactly 1 year. The third one has a heart attack and dies on the spot. Exactly on a year. Third doctor. Just like Rav Mordechai Eliyahu said. He calls Rav Mordechai Eliyahu. He wants to tell him. He wants to tell him what happened. And Rav Mordechai Eliyahu says to him before he even says, oh, Kvod Rav, it's Yechiel. He says to him, yes, I know they all died and the third one died today, right? He says, I forgot that someone that could already say something a year in advance doesn't need me to give him updates on the news either. He doesn't need updates. I forgot who I was talking to for a second. 15 years later, that little boy was named Daniel because Daniel is known as a very smart prophet that we have. He was a genius. Not just a prophet, but he was also a genius. So they named the boy Daniel. When he was 16 years old, he was in yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael, and there was a shiur that Rav Mordechai Eliyahu was giving, and for the first time in his life, Daniel attended the shiur. After the shiur was over, people are coming towards the Rav to get blessings and so on, and Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, out of everybody, points at Daniel. He doesn't know, I've never seen him in his life. He says, you, come here. He brings little Daniel to him. He says, your parents are Sfaradi or Ashkenazi? And little Daniel says, my Abba is Sfaradi, my Ima is Ashkenazi. He says, then you must be Yechiel Nahari's son. You're his boy. He says, yeah, the Rav know. He goes, I know a lot more. Let me tell you a story about what happened before you were born. He sits down with the little boy, Daniel, and he tells him the entire story that I just told you. The boy is enamored, obviously, runs back home after this, hears the story from the Gedolei Hador, runs to his parents, it's true. He says to him, not only is it true, but you heard it from the source. Why didn't you tell me? We waited to tell you when you were going to get married, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted you to know it before, so you heard it from the source itself. You heard it from the Gedolei Hador. So little Daniel says to his father, so does Rav Mordechai Eliyahu have Ruach HaKodesh? He says, Rav Mordechai Eliyahu has a lot more than Ruach HaKodesh. He just doesn't share it with everybody. You see, Rabotai Karim, our Chachamim, there is no nation in the world that ever had or ever will have such people. Now you may look at a Chacham in the street and not identify anything special about them. In fact, you may even think that they're lesser than you. But don't forget what the Chazon Ish told us early on in this book. someone that toils in Torah, someone that makes Torah their life, they're no longer men, but rather they're angels among men. They walk around like flesh and blood, like men, but they're nothing remotely close to it. They're angels among men. And these angels, Rabotai, are who we follow. These are the Gdolim. These are the greatest Jews that ever live and that ever will live. There's nothing else that compares to them. Nothing else is even the peel of an onion next to the smallest Gadol among them. Nothing is even close to them among all of the nations. The greatest among all of the nations is not equivalent to a peel of an avrech in a kollel that just completed the shas for the first time. Or even somebody that just a bachur in the yeshiva, that is shomer brit, shomer shabbat, shomer halacha, and wants to be a gadol. All of the nations in the world are simply a drop in the bottom of the barrel in comparison to the ocean that is Am Yisrael. And Am Yisrael, that's the Chachamim. This is why we listen to them, and this is why we have blind faith in what they say. Why? Because we know these are who HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose to lead us as the people. When we follow the Gdolim, we know HaKadosh Baruch Hu is backing it. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is backing it, who are we to disagree? Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'amen.
אני מברך את הרבנים, רגע. אני מברך את הרבנים, הרב ירון ראובן, הרב אפרים כחלון, ראשי ארגון בעזרת השם, שהלכו בפי עליון, שעלו מעלה, יהיה להם ברכה והצלחה, הקדוש ברוך הוא ימלא בישועות ליבם לטובה ולברכה, שבכל מה שיפנו ישכילו ויצליחו, יזכו לעשות כאלה וכאלה, רדיות תורה לאדירה, אמן ואמן.
בעזרת השם רשת בכל הארץ. הוא היהודי הזה, הוא היה מיליונר, סגר את כל הביזנס, אמר אני משקיע פה בעולמה של תורה.
איפה הוא גר?
בפלורידה.
פלורידה, איפה זה פלורידה? באמריקה.
במיימי. כן, ליד. אנחנו שם עכשיו הולכים להקים קהילה ספרדית.
חזק אותו בשמי.
קהילה ספרדית גדולה.
תעביר לו מה שבירכתי אותו.
כן, קהילה ספרדית גדולה.
כן.